What happens when this perfect marriage is built on a foundation of perfect lies for Alice Croft, wife of tech billionaire Julian Croft? Her gilded life was about to shatter. She had the Fifth Avenue penthouse, the wardrobe of a queen, and a baby on the way. She had everything, except the truth. Because in the shadows of their empire, a devastating affair was flourishing. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's the story of a pregnant wife fighting for her future, a confident mistress who wants it all, and a courtroom that became a battleground where secrets lies and a 9-figure fortune were laid bare for the world to see. Stay with us as we unravel the shocking real-life drama of the Croft divorce. The air in the penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park was always perfectly climate-controlled, a crisp 72 degrees Fahrenheit that defied the sweltering New York City summer. For Alice Croft, that controlled perfection had once been a comfort. Now it felt like a mausoleum. At 34, she was the embodiment of curated elegance. A former art curator for the Guggenheim, she had a discerning eye and a quiet grace that seemed to complement her husband's explosive ambition. She was 7 months pregnant with their first child, a son, and her world was supposed to be a symphony of soft pastels and joyful anticipation. Instead, it was filled with a silent, screeching discord. Her husband was Julian Croft. At 40, he was the charismatic founder and CEO of Innovate Dynamics, a tech behemoth that had revolutionized data security. He was a media darling, the self-made titan with a dazzling smile, a philanthropic spirit, and a seemingly unshakable adoration for his beautiful wife. Their life was a meticulously crafted narrative for magazines like Forbes and Vogue, the power couple, the modern dynasty, the epitome of success and love. They attended the Met Gala hosted charity auctions that raised millions and vacationed in places so exclusive they were little more than rumors to the general public. The first crack in this perfect facade appeared not with a bang, but with a quiet chime. It was 17 a.m. Julian was supposedly asleep beside her, his breathing slow and even. But his phone left charging on the nightstand, lit up with a message preview. Alice, awake with the familiar discomfort of late pregnancy, glanced over. Isabella R. Monaco was a dream. Our little secret is safe. Can't wait for the next chapter. The words hit her with the force of a physical blow. Monaco. Julian had been in Monaco 2 weeks ago for a tech summit. He'd called her every night, his voice thick with feigned loneliness, telling her how much he missed her, how he couldn't wait to be home with her, and the little guy. He'd brought her back a vintage Cartier brooch, a thinking of you gift that now felt like a piece of shrapnel. Isabella R. The name was instantly recognizable. Isabella Rossi. She was Julian's rising star, the fiercely intelligent and stunningly beautiful Vice President of European Operations for Innovate Dynamics. Julian had praised her relentlessly for months. She's a killer, Elle, a real asset. Reminds me of me when I was starting out. Alice had met her a few times at company events. Isabella was all sharp angles and sharper intellect, dressed in tailored power suits. Her handshake firm, her eye contact unwavering. She had looked right at Alice's pregnant belly, smiled and said, "You are absolutely glowing. Julian is a lucky man." The memory of that smile now felt like a viper's strike. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the silent, opulent room. She wanted to scream, to shake Julian awake and demand an answer. But a cold, crystalline clarity cut through the burgeoning panic. Julian was a master of control, a puppeteer of narratives. A hysterical pregnant wife at 2 a.m. was a character he could easily manage, dismiss, and gaslight. He would call her hormonal paranoid, insecure. He would twist the words until she doubted her own sanity. No, she would not give him that power. Lying perfectly still, feigning sleep, she waited until his breathing deepened once more. Then, with the stealth of a thief in her own home, she slipped out of bed. In Julian's home office, a sleek space of glass and chrome, she turned on his computer. His password, ironically, was Alice and Julian forever. The bitter taste of bile rose in her throat. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she started with the company travel logs. Monaco. The summit had ended on a Thursday. Julian's flight back was booked for Monday afternoon. He had told her the extra days were for investor meetings. The hotel records, however, showed a 2-bedroom suite at the Hotel de Paris, Monte Carlo. Why would a man traveling alone need a 2-bedroom suite deeper? She dug her fingers, flying across the keyboard, fueled by adrenaline and a growing dread. She found expense reports. A dinner for 2 at Le Louis XV, a 3-Michelin-star restaurant, for over 1,500 tons. A receipt from a high-end jeweler, Buccellati, for a diamond tennis bracelet, a piece of jewelry she had never seen. The charge was logged under client entertainment. The final damning piece of evidence came from a folder buried deep within a cloud server he probably thought was impenetrable. It was labeled Personal Projects. Inside was a subfolder titled The Nightingale. It contained architectural blueprints and interior design mock-ups for a stunning cliffside villa in Portofino, Italy. And at the bottom of the title block, under Client Name, were 2 names, Julian Croft and Isabella Rossi. The room began to spin. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't a one-time mistake in Monaco. This was a parallel life, a future he was building with another woman, while their baby grew inside of her. The name of the project, The Nightingale, was a cruel, poetic jab. It was Julian's pet name for her from the early days of their relationship, because he said her laughter sounded like a song. He was giving her name, her future, her life to someone else. Alice stood up, her hand instinctively going to her swollen belly, a protective gesture for the only person in this world she could be certain of. The baby kicked a small, innocent flutter against her palm. In that moment, the grief that threatened to drown her was replaced by a cold, hard fury. Julian Croft had not just broken her heart. He had declared war on her future and the future of her child. And Alice Croft, who had once curated priceless art, would now curate his complete and utter destruction. She closed the laptop, walked out of the office, and knew with absolute certainty that her perfect gilded life was over. The battle had just begun. The days that followed were a masterclass in deception, a role Alice never thought she'd have to play. She was the perfect doting wife. She smiled when Julian kissed her goodbye in the morning, her stomach churning as his lips, the same lips that had likely kissed Isabella Rossi, brushed against hers. She discussed nursery colors, attended her prenatal appointments, and hosted a small dinner party, all with a serene smile plastered on her face. Inside, she was a strategist, a general mapping out a campaign. Her first move was not to a lawyer, but to a man named David Chen, a private investigator whose name she'd gotten from a discreet acquaintance who had gone through a similarly contentious divorce. Chen was a former NYPD detective with a reputation for being methodical, invisible, and utterly ruthless in his pursuit of the truth. They met in a nondescript coffee shop in the West Village, far from the prying eyes of her upscale neighborhood. Alice dressed down in jeans and a simple maternity top. Her face, shielded by sunglasses, laid out the story. She didn't cry. Her voice was steady, her instructions precise. "I don't just need confirmation. Mr. Chen," she said, her hands clasped around a cup of decaf coffee she wasn't drinking. "I know it's happening. I need a timeline. I need evidence of assets. Bank accounts, properties, gifts. I need to know the depth of the rot. I need leverage." Chen listened, his expression unreadable. "This will be expensive, Mrs. Croft, and it could get ugly. My husband is worth over $800 million all," Alice replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Ugly is a price I'm willing to pay. Expense is not an object." For the next 3 weeks, Chen and his team were ghosts in Julian's life. They tailed him from his office on Wall Street to clandestine meetings. They documented every lunch, every late night, board meeting. The reports that landed in Alice's encrypted email inbox each night were a slow, methodical poisoning of her memories. There were photos. Julian and Isabella, their heads close together in a dark corner of a high-end cocktail bar, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. A weekend trip to a secluded estate in the Hamptons, owned by a shell corporation Chen was already tracing. They were captured laughing on the beach, looking for all the world like a carefree couple in love. The most damning picture was taken through a telephoto lens outside a private brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. It showed Julian handing a set of keys to Isabella, followed by a long, passionate kiss before she let herself in. It was their love nest. Chen's financial team worked in parallel, unraveling the complex web of shell corporations and offshore accounts Julian had created. They discovered the St. Croix Legacy Trust, a fund based in the Cayman Islands, with millions siphoned from Innovate Dynamics stock sales. They found the deed to the Brooklyn brownstone purchased by an LLC that traced back to Julian's personal lawyer. The Portofino villa was a work in progress with millions already funneled to Italian contractors. This wasn't just an affair. It was a systematic, calculated effort to build a new life funded by assets that were by law marital property. He wasn't just cheating on her, he was stealing from her and their unborn child. With a thick file of evidence that felt as heavy as a tombstone, Alice knew it was time. She chose a Sunday evening, the quiet end of a weekend, to confront him. She had sent the household staff away for the night. It was just the two of them in the vast, silent penthouse. Julian was in the living room, a glass of expensive scotch in hand, looking over some documents. He looked up and smiled as she entered. "Hey, Nightingale, how are you and the little guy feeling?" The use of the pet name was so audacious, so cruel, that it solidified her resolve. She didn't speak. She walked to the marble coffee table and placed a single glossy 8x10 photograph on top of his papers. It was the photo of him kissing Isabella outside the Brooklyn brownstone. Julian froze. The blood drained from his face. His charming, confident mask dissolved, replaced by a flicker of pure panic. He stared at the picture, then up at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Elle, listen," he started, his voice a hoarse whisper. "This is not what it looks like." The gaslighting had begun just as she'd predicted, but this time she was ready. "Isn't it?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. "Then perhaps you can explain these." She laid out more photos. The Hamptons, the restaurant in Monaco. Or this. She placed the blueprint for the Portofino villa on the pile. "I especially like the name. The Nightingale. A touching sentiment." Julian shot to his feet, his composure shattering completely. "Where did you get this? Are you spying on me?" "This is insane, Alice. Your hormones are making you crazy. My hormones are not the ones buying property with your mistress, she shot back, her voice rising for the first time. My hormones are not the ones setting up offshore accounts to hide marital assets. My hormones are not the ones kissing another woman on the steps of the brownstone you bought for her. He stared at her, cornered and exposed. The denial evaporated, replaced by a desperate attempt at damage control. It was a mistake, Elle. A stupid, meaningless mistake. It's over. I swear. It meant nothing. You and the baby are my life. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. Alice laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed in the cavernous room. Fix this. You think this is a leaky faucet, Julian. You built a whole other life behind my back. You were planning a future while you patted my belly and told me you loved me. There is no fixing this. She walked to the desk by the window and picked up a thick manila envelope she had placed there earlier. She tossed it onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud. Those are divorce papers, Julian. My lawyer will be in touch with yours in the morning. I want you out of this apartment. Tonight. His face contorted into a mask of disbelief, then rage. The charming Julian Croft was gone, replaced by the ruthless tyrant his board of directors knew well. You can't be serious. You're throwing everything away over a stupid mistake. You'll get nothing, Alice. I will bury you in court. I will prove you're an unfit mother. You will walk away with nothing but the clothes on your back. Alice looked him dead in the eye, her gaze unflinching. No, Julian, you're wrong. I have David Chen's entire file. The photos, the financial records, the proof of fraud. You won't bury me. You'll be too busy trying to stay out of prison. She turned and walked towards their bedroom, her back straight, her resolve absolute. She could hear him behind her shouting, pleading, threatening, his words washing over her like meaningless static. She closed the bedroom door, locked it, and leaned against the cool wood, finally allowing a single tear to trace a path down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of release. The unveiling was complete. The war was about to go public. The day after Julian moved out, Alice met with Evelyn Reed. Recommended by a contact on the Guggenheim's board of trustees, Reed was one of New York's most formidable divorce attorneys. Her office, with its panoramic views of the city skyline, was as sharp and intimidating as her reputation. She wasn't known for fostering amicable splits. She was known for winning. Evelyn, a woman in her late 50s, with silver hair, cut in a severe, elegant bob, and eyes that missed nothing, listened to Alice's story without interruption. She examined the file from David Chen, her expression grimly satisfied. Well, Mrs. Croft, she said, closing the file, your husband is either incredibly arrogant or incredibly stupid. Possibly both. This is not just grounds for divorce. This is a potential powder keg of corporate and financial malfeasance. Alice felt a wave of relief. So I have a strong case. Evelyn offered a rare, thin smile. You have a cudgel. He thinks his money and power make him untouchable. We are going to disabuse him of that notion. Our first step is to file for a temporary restraining order to freeze his personal and business assets. We need to stop the bleeding. He can't be allowed to move any more money. Julian, as expected, did not take this lying down. He hired Marcus Thorne, a legal pit bull, famous for representing disgraced CEOs and white-collar criminals. Thorne's strategy was immediately apparent: attack, discredit, and overwhelm. The first volley of legal documents arrived at Alice's penthouse via courier, a stack of paper nearly a foot high. In it, Thorne's team painted Alice as a vindictive, emotionally unstable gold digger, using her pregnancy as a weapon to extort an unreasonable settlement from a hard-working, benevolent man who had made a single regrettable error in judgment. They claimed her spying was an illegal invasion of privacy, and that the financial documents were misinterpreted by a woman with no business acumen. They counteroffered with a divorce settlement that was, in Evelyn Reed's words, a goddamn insult. It offered her the penthouse, which was in her name anyway, a lump sum of $5 million, and child support that was laughably inadequate for a man of Julian's wealth. "They're trying to scare you into a quick, quiet settlement," Evelyn explained over the phone, her voice laced with contempt. "They want to avoid discovery at all costs. That file you have is what they're terrified of. Thorne knows that if this goes to trial, and we start subpoenaing Innovate Dynamics' financial records and deposing their executives, this whole house of cards could come down. The affair will be the least of his problems." The pre-trial period was a brutal war of attrition. Thorne filed motion after motion, trying to have Alice's evidence thrown out, demanding psychological evaluations, and attempting to bury Evelyn's small firm in a mountain of paperwork. But Evelyn Reed was unflappable. For every motion Thorne filed, she filed 2 more. She subpoenaed Isabella Rossi. She subpoenaed Julian's personal accountant, his lawyer, and the entire board of Innovate Dynamics. The media, catching the scent of blood in the water, descended. The Croft divorce became tabloid fodder, the lead story on gossip sites and financial news networks alike. Paparazzi camped outside Alice's building. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire's messy split, pregnant wife versus VP Mistress, Innovate Dynamics CEO in love triangle turmoil." Alice became a recluse. The penthouse that once felt like a car now felt like the only safe bunker. She stopped reading the news, the cruel online comments dissecting her appearance, her motives, her pain. Her life became a series of prenatal checkups and long, grueling meetings with Evelyn and her team, preparing for the deposition that would be the first real clash. The deposition took place in a sterile conference room in a neutral law office. It was the first time she had seen Julian since that fateful night. He sat across the long, polished table, flanked by Marcus Thorne and 2 junior lawyers. He looked thinner, his face drawn and tired, but his eyes held a cold fury. He refused to look at her. Isabella Rossi was deposed separately. Alice was not present for it, but Evelyn recounted the details later. Isabella, with her own high-priced lawyer, was cool and collected. She admitted to the affair, but framed it as a deep, loving relationship. She claimed Julian had promised to leave Alice for her, that their plans were for a future together. She portrayed herself not as a home wrecker, but as the true object of Julian's affection, and Alice as the unfortunate but necessary collateral damage. "She's smart, and she's arrogant," Evelyn told Alice. "She believes she holds all the cards. She thinks Julian will protect her. She has no idea he will throw her to the wolves to save himself." The final attempt to avoid a trial came a week before the court date. Marcus Thorne requested a settlement conference. They met in the judge's chambers, a formal wood-paneled room that felt suffocating. Thorne, in his silky, condescending tone, presented a new, generous offer. He'd doubled the lump sum to $10 million and increased the child support. "Mr. Croft wishes to put this unfortunate matter behind him for the sake of the child," Thorne said, as if Julian were a magnanimous saint. Evelyn Reed didn't even look at her notes. Mr. Thorne, your client has systematically defrauded my client of tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. He funneled marital assets into offshore accounts and slush funds for his mistress. This isn't an unfortunate matter. It's grand larceny with a marriage license. The offer is rejected. We demand 50% of all marital assets, including a forensic accounting of Innovate Dynamics, to determine its true valuation, plus punitive damages for emotional distress and fraud. Thorne scoffed. That's ludicrous. No judge will ever award that. Then I suppose, Evelyn said, gathering her papers, we'll see you in court. As they left the chambers, Julian spoke to Alice for the first time. His voice was low and menacing. You are making a terrible mistake, Elle. You have no idea what you're doing. You will regret this. Alice stopped and finally looked directly at him. Her gaze was steady, her voice devoid of the tremor she felt in her heart. The only thing I regret, Julian, is ever believing you were the man I married. The battle lines were drawn. The attempts at a quiet resolution had failed. The private pain was about to become a public spectacle. The courtroom was waiting. The first day of the trial felt like the premiere of a Hollywood blockbuster. A chaotic swarm of reporters, photographers, and television crews mobbed the steps of the New York County Supreme Court. The whispers and shouts followed Alice as she walked up the steps, her hand protectively on her belly, which was now prominently beautifully round under her simple but elegant navy blue maternity dress. Evelyn Reed was at her side, a bastion of calm in the swirling storm, whispering quiet words of encouragement. Inside the courtroom was packed. The public gallery was filled with a mix of curious onlookers and journalists scribbling furiously in their notebooks. Julian and his legal team were already seated at the plaintiff's table. He looked impeccable in a tailored charcoal suit, his face a carefully composed mask of sober concern. He was playing the part of the wronged husband, forced into this circus by a grasping, hysterical wife. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Justice Amelia Vance, entered, and a hush fell over the room. She had a reputation for being sharp, fair, and utterly intolerant of legal theatrics. Ms. Reed, Judge Vance said, her voice crisp. You may begin with your opening statement. Evelyn Reed rose and walked to the lectern. She stood for a moment, making eye contact with the jury, a panel of ordinary New Yorkers who now held Alice's future in their hands. Good morning, she began, her voice clear and strong. This is not simply a divorce case. We are not here today because a marriage sadly came to an end. We are here because of a calculated and profound betrayal. A betrayal that is not just emotional, but financial and on a staggering scale. She painted a picture of Alice and Julian's early life together, their meeting, their marriage, the building of his empire with Alice as his partner and staunchest supporter. Alice Croft was not just a wife, Evelyn stated, gesturing towards her. She was a co-architect of the life Mr. Croft enjoys today. While he built his company, she built their home, their social standing, their philanthropic reputation. Every dollar he earned was marital property, a partnership. Then her tone shifted, becoming harder, sharper. But while Alice was at home creating a nursery for their unborn son, Mr. Croft was engaging in a campaign of breathtaking deception. He was not just having an affair. He was systematically looting the marital estate. He was taking the money that rightfully belonged to his wife and his child, and using it to build a secret parallel life with his subordinate, Miss Isabella Rossi. We will present evidence, she continued, her voice ringing with conviction, that shows Mr. Croft funneled millions of dollars into secret offshore accounts, that he purchased lavish gifts, properties, and even planned a future home with his mistress, all with money he was hiding from his pregnant wife. This is not a case about a broken heart. This is a case about fraud. It is about a man who believed his wealth and power placed him above the law, above decency, and above the sacred vows he made to his wife. We will ask you to hold him accountable." She sat down, and the courtroom was palpably tense. Marcus Thorne then swaggered to the lectern, a confident, almost pitying curl on his face. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began in a smooth, resonant voice, "what you just heard was a beautiful piece of fiction. A dramatic tale spun to distract you from the simple, sad truth. The truth is that Julian Croft is a brilliant, hard-working man who, like many men, made a mistake. He is human. He strayed from his marriage, and he is deeply, deeply remorseful for the pain he caused. He portrayed Julian as a victim of a high-pressure job and a moment of weakness. He painted Isabella Rossi not as a co-conspirator, but as a temporary distraction. The claims of financial fraud," Thorne said, with a dismissive wave of his hand, "are a fantasy, a desperate attempt by Mrs. Croft, egged on by her lawyer, to turn a simple divorce into a winning lottery ticket. Every financial decision Mr. Croft made was a legitimate business expense or a prudent investment strategy. Mrs. Croft, with all due respect, has no understanding of complex corporate finance. She sees a transaction she doesn't recognize and screams, 'Fraud!'" He looked at Alice with performative sympathy. "My client loves his child. He wants nothing more than to resolve this peacefully and ensure his son is provided for. He has made a generous, more than fair settlement offer, but Mrs. Croft wants to punish him. She wants to destroy his reputation and his company out of spite. Don't let her use this courtroom for revenge. This is a divorce, not a corporate takedown. We will show you that Mr. Croft's only crime was a moment of human failing for which he is profoundly sorry." Thorne returned to his seat, looking pleased with himself. The battle lines were clear. Was this a story of calculated fraud or scorned revenge? The first few days of the trial were a dry procedural slog through financial documents. Evelyn Reed called forensic accountants to the stand, who painstakingly traced money from Innovate Dynamics accounts to the shell corporations and offshore trusts. Thorne's cross-examinations were aggressive, attempting to muddy the waters, to portray the transactions as complex but legal to bore the jury into confusion. But the energy in the courtroom shifted dramatically on the fourth day. "The plaintiff calls Ms. Isabella Rossi to the stand," Evelyn announced. A ripple of excitement went through the gallery. All eyes turned to the back of the courtroom as Isabella Rossi walked forward. She was the picture of corporate power and confidence. Dressed in a sharp, cream-colored Chanel suit, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. She looked less like a witness in a messy divorce and more like she was about to close a billion-dollar deal. She walked with an unhurried, deliberate grace, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. She completely avoided looking at Alice, but shot a quick, almost imperceptible glance at Julian, a look of solidarity, of a shared secret. She took her seat in the witness box, swore the oath, and faced Evelyn Reed with an expression of cool composure. The clash everyone had been waiting for was about to begin. "Ms. Rossi," Evelyn Reed began, her tone deceptively gentle. "Could you please state your position at Innovate Dynamics?" "I am the Senior Vice President of European Operations," Isabella replied, her voice steady and clear, with a faint, unplaceable European accent that added to her mystique. "And how long have you been employed by the company?" 7 years. "In those 7 years, you've had quite a meteoric rise through the ranks, haven't you?" "I've worked hard," Isabella said, a hint of pride in her voice. "And Mr. Croft rewards talent and dedication." "I'm sure he does," Evelyn said, letting the insinuation hang in the air. "Sir, Rossi, were you engaged in a romantic sexual relationship with your boss, Mr. Julian Croft?" Isabella's lawyer stood up. "Objection. Relevance." "It is the entire relevance of this proceeding, Your Honor," Evelyn countered smoothly. "Overruled," Judge Vance stated. "Answer the question, Ms. Rossi." Isabella turned her gaze to the jury, her expression one of earnest sincerity. "Julian and I were in love. It wasn't just an affair. We had a deep connection. He was unhappy in his marriage for a long time." A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. Alice felt a hot flash of rage. Isabella wasn't just admitting to the affair. She was trying to rewrite history, to invalidate Alice's entire marriage. Evelyn remained unfazed. "He told you he was unhappy." "Yes, constantly. He felt his wife didn't understand the pressures he was under. He described their relationship as distant, more of a business arrangement." "I see," Evelyn said, picking up a document from her table. "So while he was in Monaco with you in June, staying in a 2-bedroom suite at the Hotel de Paris, a trip you expensed as a strategic corporate retreat, he was telling you he was unhappy." "We were working," Isabella insisted, though a flicker of annoyance crossed her face. "But yes, we also discussed our future." "And did that future include this?" Evelyn projected a photo onto the large screen in the courtroom. It was the picture of Julian kissing Isabella outside the Brooklyn brownstone. Isabella's composure finally cracked. A faint blush crept up her neck. "We had feelings for each other." "And did those feelings also extend to financial matters? Did your deep connection involve you helping Mr. Croft manage his assets?" "I am a senior executive. Of course I am involved in the company's financial strategy." "I'm not talking about the company's strategy, Ms. Rossi. I'm talking about Mr. Croft's personal strategy. A strategy to move money out of his and his wife's reach." Marcus Thorne was on his feet. "Objection, counsel is leading the witness and making unsubstantiated claims." "Sustained," Judge Vance said. "Ms. Reed, get to the point." "I will, Your Honor," Evelyn said, a predatory gleam in her eye. She walked closer to the witness stand. "Ms. Rossi, are you familiar with an entity known as the St. Croix Legacy Trust?" Isabella hesitated for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. The confidence wavered. "I may have heard of it." "Heard of it?" Evelyn's voice was sharp. "Let me refresh your memory. This is a trust domiciled in the Cayman Islands, a location well known for its financial privacy. Mr. Croft has been funding this trust with proceeds from his personal stock sales for the last 18 months. Is that correct?" "I am not his personal accountant," Isabella deflected. "No, you're not," Evelyn agreed. "You are something far more important. You are a beneficiary." The courtroom fell into a stunned silence. Julian Croft went rigid, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the edge of his table. Marcus Thorne looked as if he'd been punched in the gut. Evelyn projected another document onto the screen. It was the trust formation document obtained through a court order to a bank in Grand Cayman. There, in black and white, were the names of the beneficiaries. The primary beneficiary was Julian Croft. The secondary contingent beneficiary, set to inherit upon his death or incapacitation, was Isabella Rossi. "This trust, Ms. Rossi currently holds $37 million, Evelyn announced, her voice echoing in the silent room. $37 million of marital assets secretly siphoned into an offshore account that lists you as the heir. Does that sound like a deep connection Or does it sound like a payment plan? Was this your reward for your talent and dedication? Isabella was visibly flustered. Her mask of cool control shattered. That's a private financial arrangement. It has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with this, Evelyn thundered. This is money that belongs to Mrs. Croft and her child. It is the textbook definition of financial fraud in a marriage. Mr. Croft wasn't just building a future with you in Portofino. He was ensuring you were financially secure with money he was stealing from his family. She turned from the now pale witness and looked directly at Julian. No further questions for this witness, Your Honor. As Isabella stepped down from the stand, she shot a look of pure venom at Julian. It was the look of a partner who had just realized she was being set up as the fall guy. Julian, for his part, wouldn't meet her eyes. He stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched, his multi-million-dollar legal defense crumbling around him. Alice sat perfectly still, her heart pounding. This was it, the first major crack in his fortress of lies. But as she watched Isabella storm out of the courtroom, a cold premonition washed over her. A woman that smart, that ambitious, and that scorned was not going to go down without a fight. The first twist had been revealed, but Alice had a feeling the most devastating bombshell was yet to come. The revelation of the St. Croix Legacy Trust sent shockwaves through the proceedings. The media went into a frenzy with headlines shifting from billionaire's affair to billionaire's fraud. Innovate Dynamics stock took a noticeable dip as investors grew nervous about the CEO's ethics. The atmosphere in the courtroom turned frigid. Julian Croft was no longer the charming rogue. He was a potential criminal. Marcus Thorne's strategy shifted from aggressive defense to desperate tour control. His cross-examination of Alice, which was supposed to paint her as unstable and greedy, was now his only hope. He tried to portray her as a complicit spouse who enjoyed the lavish lifestyle, but turned a blind eye to the finances only crying foul when the marriage ended. Mrs. Croft, he began, his tone dripping with condescension. You claim you had no idea about your husband's financial dealings, yet you lived in a 10,000-square-foot penthouse, wore haute couture, and vacationed on private yachts. Did you ever once question where all that money came from? Alice met his gaze without flinching. I never questioned my husband's integrity, Mr. Thorne. I believed he was an honest man. That was my mistake. So you were content to reap the benefits without any of the responsibility. I was his wife and partner, not his auditor. Alice retorted, her voice firm. My responsibility was to our life and our family. His was to be honest. He failed in his responsibility, not me. Thorne was getting nowhere. The jury looked at Alice, her pregnant form, a powerful symbol of vulnerability and strength with sympathy. He switched tactics, trying to discredit Isabella Rossi, the woman his client had been championing just days earlier. He was trying to sever the connection, to paint her as the manipulative mastermind. Isn't it true, Mrs. Croft, Thorne pressed, that Ms. Rossi was an exceptionally ambitious woman, that perhaps she seduced your husband, seeing him as a ticket to wealth and power? Objection, Evelyn Reed called out. Counsel is asking my client to speculate on Ms. Rossi's motives. Sustained, Judge Vance agreed. The entire defense was imploding. Julian's attempts to throw Isabella under the bus were transparent and pathetic. He was trying to save himself at her expense, and it was obvious to everyone in the room. The trial was scheduled to conclude the following day with closing arguments. That evening, Evelyn Reed received an unexpected call. It was from Isabella Rossi's lawyer. Ms. Rossi would like to be recalled to the stand tomorrow. The lawyer stated, his voice tight. She has new evidence to present to the court. The next morning, a palpable buzz of anticipation filled the courtroom. No one knew what to expect. When Judge Vance announced that Ms. Rosie would be returning to the stand at her own request, Julian Croft's face went ashen. Isabella walked to the stand with a different demeanor than before. The cool confidence was gone, replaced by a cold, righteous anger. She was no longer Julian's partner in crime. She was his executioner. "Ms. Rosie," her lawyer began, "you have informed the court you have new evidence pertinent to this case. Please explain." Isabella looked directly at Judge Vance. "Your Honor, for the past 2 days I have watched Mr. Croft and his legal team attempt to portray me as a manipulative seductress and a gold digger. They have tried to lay the blame for his financial crimes at my feet. Mr. Croft made me promises. He told me he was building a life for us. But he is a liar, and he is a coward." She took a small digital audio recorder from her purse and placed it on the witness stand railing. Julian Croft is a very careful man. He rarely puts anything incriminating in writing, but he likes to talk. He likes to brag. For the last year, as a measure of insurance, I recorded many of our private conversations. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Marcus Thorne shot to his feet. "Objection. Your Honor, this is an illegal recording. It's inadmissible." Isabella's lawyer was ready. "New York is a one-party consent state, Your Honor. My client was a party to these conversations and consented to their recording. They are perfectly legal." Judge Vance looked at Thorne. "Objection overruled. Let's hear what Ms. Rosie has to say." "The first recording," Isabella said, her voice dripping with ice, "is from May of this year. We were in his office discussing the second quarter earnings report for Innovate Dynamics." She pressed play. The sound of Julian Croft's confident, unmistakable voice filled the courtroom, amplified by the microphone on the stand. Julian audio. "The numbers are good, but we can make them look better. We'll shift the R&D expenditure to the third quarter books. It'll inflate the net profit, now the stock will pop, and I'll sell another block of my personal shares before anyone's the wiser. I'll move the profit straight to St. Croix. Alice will never even see the statement. She thinks the market is just having a good year." The recording ended. The room was deathly silent. This was no longer just about hiding marital assets. This was a confession of securities fraud and insider trading. Julian had sunk low in his chair, his head in his hands. Isabella was not finished. This next recording is from August, just after he found out Alice had hired a private investigator. She pressed play again. Isabella audio. "She knows Julian. She knows about us." Julian audio. "Let her know. It doesn't matter. Thorne will bury her. We'll claim she's mentally unstable because of the pregnancy. The real problem is the money. We need to accelerate the transfer of assets out of the main accounts. I'll create a new LLC under my mother's maiden name, transfer the deed for the Brooklyn brownstone to it. We just have to make the money trail so damn complicated that by the time her forensic accountants figure it out, we'll have settled for pennies on the dollar. She's emotional. She'll get tired of fighting and she'll break." The raw, cynical cruelty of his words sucked the air out of the room. He wasn't just a cheater and a thief. He was a monster plotting to use his wife's pregnancy against her, banking on her emotional exhaustion. Alice stared at the man she had once loved, now a complete stranger. The man on that recording was a venomous, hollow creature. All the lingering pain and sadness she felt instantly evaporated, replaced by a profound, cleansing finality. She was free of him. Isabella switched off the recorder. There are 12 more hours of recordings, Your Honor. They detail numerous instances of financial deception, conspiracy to defraud, and market manipulation. I have submitted them all as evidence. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Journalists were sprinting for the doors. The court officer was shouting for order. Judge Vance was banging her gavel, but the sound was lost in the roar. Marcus Thorne was frantically whispering to a stunned, catatonic Julian Croft. Evelyn Reed reached over and gently squeezed Alice's hand. She didn't need to say a word. The bombshell had detonated. The case was over. Julian Croft's life as he knew it was over. He had been exposed not by his wife, not by the lawyers, but by the one person he thought was his partner in his deceit. In her quest for self-preservation, Isabella Rossi had brought down the entire empire. The fallout from Isabella's bombshell was immediate and catastrophic. Marcus Thorne, seeing the smoking crater where his case used to be, immediately moved to settle. There was no more negotiation, no more posturing. Evelyn Reed dictated the terms, and Thorne had no choice but to accept. The final divorce decree was a document of total surrender for Julian Croft. Alice was awarded a staggering 60% of all marital assets, a figure determined after a court-appointed forensic team conducted a deep-dive audit of Julian's entire financial world, guided by the roadmap Isabella's recordings had provided. This amounted to over $450 million. She was also given sole ownership of the Fifth Avenue penthouse, the Hamptons estate, and a portfolio of art and investments. She received full legal and physical custody of their son, with Julian being granted only supervised visitation contingent on passing psychological evaluations. But his divorce was just the beginning of his nightmare. The Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) launched a full-scale investigation into Innovate Dynamics based on the evidence from the trial. Julian was forced to step down as CEO. He and several other top executives were indicted on charges of securities fraud, insider trading, and conspiracy. His face, once a fixture on the glossy covers of business magazines, was now plastered across the news in a grim mugshot. Isabella Rossi did not escape unscathed. Her cooperation and the explosive evidence she provided earned her a plea deal with federal prosecutors. She avoided prison time, but was slapped with a hefty fine, a lifetime ban from serving as an officer or director of a public company, and had to forfeit any assets linked to Julian's fraudulent activities, including her beneficial interest in the St. Croix Trust. She disappeared from the public eye, her meteoric career ending in a blaze of infamy. Months passed. The media frenzy died down, replaced by new scandals, new dramas. The world moved on. For Alice, however, the world had been fundamentally, irrevocably altered. One crisp autumn afternoon, 4 months after the trial ended, Alice stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse. The apartment was different now. She had redecorated, replacing Julian's cold, minimalist aesthetic with warmth, color, and life. Her art was back on the walls. It was her home, now, truly hers. In her arms she held her son Leo. He was 2 months old, a tiny, perfect being with a tuft of dark hair and his mother's calm, observant eyes. He was the innocent survivor of a war he would never know was fought. He was the prize, the victory, the only thing that had ever truly mattered. The legal victory had brought her financial security beyond her wildest dreams. But it hadn't brought her joy. There was no joy in witnessing the complete moral implosion of the man she had once loved, the father of her child. The process had been brutal, hollowing her out, even as it vindicated her. Winning, she had learned, could feel almost as devastating as losing. But as she looked down at Leo's sleeping face, a different feeling began to bloom in her chest. Not joy, perhaps, but a deep, quiet sense of peace and hope. The past was a landscape of ashes and ruin, but the future was a blank canvas. She was no longer Mrs. Julian Croft, the billionaire's wife. She was Alice Leo's mother, a survivor. A woman who had walked through fire and emerged on the other side, not unscathed but whole. She watched the yellow cabs moving like tiny, determined beetles down below each one on its own journey. She had her own journey to start now. It would be quieter than her old life, less glamorous. But it would be real. It would be hers. She held her son a little tighter, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "It's just you and me. Now, little one. And we're going to be just fine." Outside, the New York City skyline stretched towards the heavens, a testament to ambition and resilience. For the first time in a very long time, Alice Croft felt like she was a part of it again, not as an ornament in a gilded cage, but as a builder of a new life, brick by painful, beautiful brick. The story of Alice Croft is a chilling reminder that the brightest lights can cast the darkest shadows. It's a tale of immense wealth, profound betrayal, and the incredible strength of a woman who refused to be broken. She fought back not just for herself, but for the future of her child, proving that truth, when wielded with courage, is the most powerful weapon of all. Julian Croft lost his empire, his reputation, and his family, all brought down by a web of lies he thought was too clever to be untangled. What would you have done in Alice's position? Could you have found the strength to fight back against such a powerful man? If this story of resilience, justice, and the dramatic implosion of a picture-perfect life captivated you, please show your support. Hit that like button to let us know you want more content like this. Share this video with someone who loves a story of strength overcoming deception. And most importantly, click subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss another deep dive into the real-life dramas that are more shocking than any work of fiction. Thank you for listening.